Well, hello, students. I want to provide a quick lecture for this week's Microsoft Excel lab. Um, and I found this particular function to be super helpful in being able to take data that there's quite a bit of data, and we need to present it to executives in a way that we can sort of metaphorically speaking get our arms around or get our head around what we're dealing with. So here's an example. Um, there are about 250 records of data. Each one of these people in this example are salespeople, sales representatives. And imagine that uh, your VP of marketing says, I want to understand how many of our sales team are in different categories of the number of sales calls that they've made over a fixed period of time. And so you can imagine that if I have 250 sales reps, okay, I can go all the way down. And if I'm again, I'm a VP of marketing, and I appreciate the list of 250 sales reps and the number of sales calls that they've made, but it really is, again, hard for me to get my head around so that I can analyze it. And so one of the things that we can do that often is very helpful is to build what would be called buckets. I don't think that's like the academic term, but it is essentially taking the data and putting the data in specific categories of, you know, between this value and that value. And that is helpful because now we can look at that data and be able to sort of dimensionalize and hopefully make decisions on that. So let me show you, and I'm just going to kind of go step by step here. I already kind of pre-built this. So I'm just going to, I went back and I'm going to move forward so you can see step by step. So I create a new column and I'm going to call it buckets. And typically what I'll like to do is I'll want to see for a data set, what is the minimum, what's the average, and what is there we go, right? A spelling of maximum. And so that sort of gives me an idea of, what are the upper and lower limits of this data set. So I calculate the minimum, right? Using equals min, calculate the average, and then calculate, whoops, I was having fun with decimals there. And then I calculate the max. Actually, I had to back that up because it was capturing the entire, the grand total of the data set. So that's not what we want. So once I remove that, actually, let me go back. Once I removed that last row, then the max for this entire data set, actually, I say 250, well, about 275, whatever it is. So now I have a sense for, it looks like the minimum that are 200 or so sales reps, number of sales calls, is 1. I'm guessing they're brand new to the company, and so hence they've only made 1 call. However, on average, across the 200 70 or so sales reps. The average is 500, and then we have a maximum of 1274. All right, so once I've calculated those three measures, then what I will do is I'll create what's called a nested if statement in Excel. So here what I've done is I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 if statements. And so the first thing I've done is I've said if C8, which is this first record, is greater than 1,000, then I want you to call this record 1,000 plus. Else, so once I put the comma in, I've done if then else if C8 is greater than 749, then put 750 plus here. Else, if C8 is greater than 499, put 500, and so on and so forth. I just sort of arbitrarily broke these buckets down into four, 0 to 250, 250 to 500, 500 to 750, and then 750 to 1,000, or even beyond. Actually, 1, 2, actually 5 buckets. Sorry about that. So now one thing that's interesting when you're doing these nested if statements is once you've gotten to the lower bucket or the lowest range that you're going to recategorize this data, then what you've done is you've said if then else, if then else, if then else, if then else. And then once you've run out of all of the other options, then the last category is the only one remaining. Okay, so I don't need to go through if then else again. The logic is I've gone through greater than 1,000, greater than 750, greater than 500, greater than 250, and then the only other logical category would be less than 250. So you can see here I don't have to do if then else. And then because I have 4 conditional questions and 4 open parentheses, left open parentheses, then I'm going to need to bookend that and put 4 closed parentheses on the other end. Okay. And so once I've done that, I can hit enter. Okay. Now I've got my categorization you want to check. So certainly 10 is less than 250. So that looks like the logic's working. I can pull that down. 405 is greater than 250. And remember our ability here, a little shortcut. So if I'm hover over this second cell here, and you can see my cursor goes from a plus sign to a cross, a black cross, then I can double click, and now I have had that nested if statement recategorization go all the way down automatically. Okay. Seems to be working here. 25 is less than 250. 398 is greater than 250. Let me see if I find one. So 500, 500 plus, 575, 500 plus. So good news. Looks like our categorization or bucketization seems to be working. Okay, so we're not done yet. This nested if helps us build these buckets. But now what we want to do is we want to summarize this a bit more so that we could, for example, get percentages of the number of sales reps in each one of those 5 categories. The easiest way to do that would be to click in the data set. And then I'm going to create a pivot table. And it looks like it didn't grab all the data. So we always have to double check and make sure that all the data has been selected. I'm going to ignore the grand total because it doesn't make sense in this analysis. Okay, so I've highlighted everything I need to highlight. I'm going to hit enter, and then well, I was going to say for simplicity's sake, we could stay in this worksheet, but let's create a new worksheet. Okay, so we've got a new worksheet here. Click OK. Now I have in a new worksheet, let's go ahead and just label this original data. Okay, and then we'll say this is pivot table. Okay. So now I've got buckets and I've got short names of sales reps. And so now what I can do is I can pull buckets down here into this lower left quadrant, and it's created each one of these buckets. Now I'll probably want to rearrange these. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to start from, let's say, the biggest on top, biggest number on biggest bucket, 1,750, 500, 250. There we go. And then less than 250. And then I'm going to take short name and I'm going to drag this down. Okay. So now what we do see, so there's our 275 sales reps. It looks like, the vast majority of our reps are in the 250 plus in less than 250. You could make this even a little more easier to get our heads around, and we can change this calculation here from count. If I click on here, count, I'm going to select value settings, and I could say show as percent of grand total. Okay, then click OK. So what we can see is that about half of our reps are in 250 or below, and another almost half are in 250 and above. Of course, you can take this table, this pivot table, click on tools. You could select pivot chart. What you could do to make it a little more attractive is you could select a pie chart. Okay. You could add data labels. So here you can see the percentages. I might make this bold. Might make the buckets bold and maybe a little bit bigger. I could call this percentage of sales reps by sales calls, sales call buckets, maybe something like that. Now everything sort of shifts down. And so, what you can see here, I'm going to make these a little bit bigger just so it's a little easier. So you can tell Mr. and Mrs. VP of marketing, it looks like, most of our reps are in the less than 250 or 250 plus. Okay, right here. Now that may or may not be good. Maybe what you would want to see is that you would have maybe a third at 750 and above, a third between 250 and 500, and a third less than 250. I don't know. But here, what we've done is we've taken 275 pieces of data and we've summarized it in a way that we can sort of get a better understanding of what is the nature of this data set and make some kind of executive decision based upon this data set. So that's the lecture for this lab. I hope it is helpful, and I will hopefully see you very soon. Thank you.